Hey guys, still getting set up here. Got a few minutes before we're ready to start. How's everyone doing tonight? Can you hear me all right? Awesome. Ha 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 ha! No sleep for you! Yeah, don't forget, guys. If you've got questions as we go along, you gotta ask. Oh yeah, we'll be carrying on with that fortress until it's gone through a year or two, or unless something bad happens. Since this is kind of my first time with 4005, it's possible there's something coming I don't know about. I know people have been talking about how invasions, at least small ones, are more common early on, which means that we may need to switch immediately into focusing on our defense before this first migrant wave arrives. So I think I'm going to show everybody how to set up a mason's workshop using the setup we've got, where we'll be able to convert, say, for example, our miners into temporary masons. They'll still mood as though they were miners anyway, but they can crank out blocks, and blocks have no quality measure, so there's no harm in that. And we can just rip out a ton of blocks from whatever stones we've excavated and then turn around and throw up walls in like no time. We'll have to get a mechanics workshop, mason's workshop, and get our metal industry inside, because right now it's exposed on the surface and we don't want that. See, typically when Advanced World Gen, I would have given myself a lot more room to play with as part of a tutorial. So we would have had 30 vertical levels between the surface and our first cavern to excavate as vertical skyscraper style design, if you will. With forgetting to change that in the World Gen, um, we don't have as much room to play with. I remembered to give myself additional space above ground up to 20 levels, but I forgot to increase the minimum Z levels between surface and caves and between the individual caves. Yeah, if you've embarked someplace that's heavily wooded, you can do that. Make sure you build a lip on the outside of your walls. Climbers can scale wooden walls, as far as I know, unless you make the walls into blocks. So building with logs is just like building with raw stone. Climbers will be able to scale your walls. If you make the walls out of blocks, they can't scale. Now they can still jump, so you have to do something like, excavate a trench around it to keep them away from the edge of the wall. And you'll want to do something like that anyway, just to keep down trees, for example. But you're definitely going to have to worry about climbers. in the new version. So while there's all this additional wood, you're down to whether you convert it to blocks. And if I recall correctly, and I have not tested with the new version, blocks are 4 to 1 when you do a boulder. So you get 4 blocks for every boulder. Yeah, there's no difference mechanically. If I recall correctly, wooden walls don't even burn. They're basically constructions just like any other, so there's no check on them. Just keep in mind, that's like building with raw stone, so you'll have goblins don't have to come in through the gate if your wood walls are 1 level high, they just walk up to the wall and climb over. Yeah, and see, and if you trench out under your overhang so that they've got to go up 2 levels and then there's an overhang, you even potentially get the chance that they may climb up and get nowhere and then have to fall. So that's something we're going to do. Even though we're making block walls, I'm going to have to build an overhang on the outer edge. So our fortress is going to look vaguely mushroom shaped, if you will. We'll have, uh, a big square base, and then we'll have a overhang over the top of that. And eventually we'll have to roof it, so there's that too. But for tonight, we'll probably just shift over into getting our masonry up. The design won't be complicated. Uh, Actually, if I've got enough blocks, depending on how it goes, how fast we can get them cranked out, we may be able to do something a little more exotic than just a plain square or circle. May put some towers around the edges, for example. But I wish I'd remembered to turn up the Z levels between the caves and above the caves, because that would have been something that new players would have taken advantage of. This is closer to vanilla, but I feel that giving yourself the room to work with is a little more enjoyable. I'm not OCD enough to care about mined out mineral veins, but I am just enough OCD to want to have all my fortress in one nice, neat, compact little stack. Oh, bonus! Apparently, there's a new version of the starter kit, and it now recognizes it and updates itself for us. Almost. It takes you to the page with the link. That's nice. Bear with me, guys. I hadn't had Dwarf Fortress actually started up, and when I go to start it, it's got a new version. I want to update the starter pack while I'm at it. We won't be able to do it quite as effectively as we would normally do it in one of my tutorials because I was careless, but we'll come close because we've got, I think I remember we had at least 8 levels to play with, which is really enough as long as you have enough area per floor. Some floors you're not going to want to have the additional area. You can leave them so, like, the dining room is big enough the way it is. The hospital dorm is big enough the way it is. If we have so many dwarves that we can't fit them all into that hospital, chances are good that our doctors are all among them, and we've got a bigger problem. But all the industries, for example, we may overlap a little bit. So, we did butchers and tanners up top like we normally do, but we had to go all the additional food processing I would normally have in just the pasture space is all right in the middle of the food stockpile, and normally I'd have those on separate floors. Now, how has it worked for you? I mean, in general. We'll probably end up with something vaguely like an 8-pointed star. 5x5 towers at the cardinal points. But that's assuming I can get the extra blocks, because of course, to weave around all those towers, you're talking about additional space that we're going to have to uh, build up. I don't know that I'll necessarily with unskilled. I only have one skilled mason, and although I'm going to have him crank out blocks at the same time as I'm doing all the others, I want to make sure that we actually have enough masons to do it. I'm not sure we'll get enough blocks out quickly enough. We'll see. But at that point, mechanic, mason, trench out the outside, overhangs and walls, and we have an indoors to be safe inside. At least for the first year. Now we're eventually going to want to have traps. We're going to want to have a proper entrance, but that can be delayed while we work around it. Been thinking about tree farms because since the underground plants have changed, basically just like the surface crops have. My usual tree farm design would be a just basically a stack itself, just outside the main fortress, and so I'd have 3 floors of tree farm even if I didn't dig out much area. But with the way the new trees work, where you have to leave them room to grow overhead, we're probably going to have to actually do a sort of pit quarry design where we spend a lot of time carving it out. So we're going to actually have to think about how we're going to do um, wood farming. Is something I normally don't have to bother with after the first year because I'll have trees indoors enough to suffice. But in this, we're probably going to have to excavate 3 floors or 4 floors down to give the trees plenty of room to grow upward, and then go along and irrigate that. But then we would have a safe indoor tree farm with the production capacity of the modern plants, and that would be pretty awesome. Basically, as soon as the starter kit copies over the save folder for our last game to the new release, I will start. That's what we're waiting on. And I may have to screw with Norton. I hate Norton. Truthfully, I'm just really retentive about being able to get all of my resources indoors and safe as part of a demonstration. At some point you kind of have to decide how much danger you're going to expose yourself to, because building an ultra safe fort really isn't that hard. And as it warns us, it may not have copied all our settings. So we'll kind of go back through and make sure everything is more or less where we wanted it. I want aquifers off. Backup saves on. Okay. Huh. Surprised the one I'm looking for isn't there. I'll have to look at that later. That's bad. Dag nabbit. Well, but wood comes in handy if you don't have coal for making fuel, which you will require for making steel. So you're either going to need wood or you're going to need coal. And the reason that wood has been turned up so much in this version is because you had to excavate an enormous tree farm underground in order to be able to sustain any sort of wood industry whatsoever. Now with the additional, um, log creation, every time you cut a tree, you don't have to worry about that as much. Alright, so where we left off last night is we've started to excavate various floors as we go down, and I've, designated them out, but I haven't actually started to dig them yet. We used Quick Fort to get the circles, we used Quick Fort to get this nice pretty bedroom design. I'm going to let the miners finish out these last couple of chunks that they've got on these two floors here that are excavating. And everything else is dug out below the surface. But something I've noticed about from what I've been, looking at online about 4005, and presumably all 40 V40 versions from here on in, is that you're getting invaders sooner. I was watching, Captain Duck's stream the other night, and he's got invaders coming in the first a kobold ambush, an actual swordsman coming to attack the fortress in right after his first migrant wave. So I'm going to let the miners finish up these last few floors so we've got some space underground, and then I'm going to convert a large chunk of my workforce into temporary masons to start getting walls up. And it won't be long before they finish these last little bits, so we'll get this cleaned out so we've got some room to build other industries. And then as soon as they all go idle, like now, we'll pop over to Dwarf Therapist. And we'll turn on the masonry labor. Now what we'll do is we'll go back to the masonry floor, we'll build 3 more of those workshops. So we're going to have 3 masons workshops set up. And I'm just building them out of whatever's to hand because I want to get them up and there's just materials right there on the site. And I don't particularly care that it's raw stone in this case. Our miners / masons don't have anything else to do right now, so they're going to come along and start building the buildings. And then I'm going to designate 1 workshop for our skilled mason and the other 3 for these unskilled temporary masons. And basically I'm just going to churn blocks. He might have obsidian crafts. See, that's the thing. I haven't been paying attention to how much wealth he was building. And if you build a lot of wealth early, you get invaders early. So I don't embark with crafts dwarfs. I don't start cranking out trade goods until relatively late. And what I'm actually going to crank out is going to be bronze discs. Because I can build traps with the discs I want to use, and I can sell the rest to buy an entire caravan. And I could buy everything out. But I'm not even going to buy the first caravan. The first caravan's a dwarven caravan. I'm going to steal that. I'm going to buy out the first elven caravan, so we'll get 2 caravans goods with what we brought with us. And then the year after, when the dwarves come back and their caravan is a little smaller, I'm going to hand them a giant stack of whatever valuable stuff we're cranking out en masse at that point, and they'll come back the year after that with an enormous caravan. Alright, so to set these workshops up, the first thing I'm going to do is go get a profile. And I originally made my mason... Oops. I originally made my mason the manager, so I could find him later if I needed to. So I'm going to set the skill limits on these so that my skilled mason is too skilled to work in these other workshops. And then we'll add block jobs to all 4. Now, our skilled mason will continue cranking out furniture in addition to blocks. And then, away we go. See, Krankos, I don't consider this first caravan theft. I consider it my just and proper that they should have sent with me in my embark points, but they didn't. And keep in mind, the year after that, I'm going to basically hand them an enormous quantity of trade goods for free. So, yeah, and assuming it works like prior versions, yes, sieges and larger attacks come with more wealth. But the faster you start creating wealth, since it's all cumulative, the earlier you're going to get them. What I don't know is if Toady made any impact on, because he got a kobold ambush. Normally you don't get kobold ambushes. In V34 you wouldn't have got them unless you let them steal an enormous quantity of stuff. And then they would send people to attack. So our masons, our temporary masons here, will come along, they'll start cranking blocks out. Every boulder that each one of these groups processes into a block gives us 4 blocks. We also need to get a mechanics workshop because we're going to need gears, basically, for our bridges and levers. And all of our miners in my profession here should, if they aren't set to their custom profession, have mining and mechanics. So I exported, for those of you who are familiar with the ads I put out for my stream, there's a link to the Embark profile, custom therapist professions, and World Gen Seed stuck in my Dropbox. It's a small file. Do me a favor and don't download it 300 times. This playlist for this YouTube is for our current version is also linked out there as well. And then we'll have, hopefully, enough blocks and walls to put up a nice, pretty defensive tower situation and get ourselves walled in, and we'll be good and safe. We'll use the bronze discs for traps and buy out that, technically, second caravan we get. Alright, let's get some mechanisms. And let's look at what else we've got to do here. We've got our dormitory built. We need to get tables and chairs up somewhere in here. And I think what we'll try to do is set this floor up as a mist generator over this dining room. Now at this point I still don't have dedicated haulers. We've only got those first 7 dwarves, so we're kind of taxing our specialists even to do hauling. And I need some place for a temporary catch-all workshop that will hold pretty much everything that goes in a bin. So now we'll query that, and just like we had the big food stockpile upstairs, we're going to have a big stockpile here that takes everything that can possibly be squeezed into a bin. Now, eventually that will become a block stockpile, but for right now, I just want to start getting stuff indoors. So I'm going to turn off most hauling on my people. I want this first migrant wave is going to come in and just absolutely have to move everything. We'll get the dining room built. But the rest of this, I don't really want them doing. Not right yet. So right now, the only things that will be moved by default from stockpile to stockpile or to a stockpile will be furniture. So that'll get our dining room tables and stuff cleared away. One thing you have to watch out for with your workshops is how cluttered they are. You'll get a little symbol up here when you query the workshop that'll say how cluttered it is. If the contents of the workshop start to stack up, like these mechanisms are doing when I look at it, you'll actually get slower production basically out of that workshop. On this floor we'll actually set up a quantum stockpile for stone. So already we've got a decent dining room, and that's nowhere near where it will be when we're done. Need to check our stocks here. We've started to get plants from our farmer, so we're already starting to produce the materials we're going to need to make booze. which is good because our drink's starting to run a little low. And we're still running at 0 idlers. I literally have no dwarf labor to spare for anything else at the moment. Prior versions I wouldn't have bothered with wooden barrels, but with the proliferation of wood, I think it's time I start using them again. And we're going to need to turn on food hauling to get rid of any backlogged food that we're starting to pile up here. Make sure everybody gets the food moved. There we go. 1 barrel cleans it all up. And we're starting to get back to where we've got idlers. Oh, they went on break. Can't tell if they're really idle. And we forgot to build that last bed for our dormitory. Alright, so what I envision here around our starting point here is a big, roughly squarish area that we'll build in.
We come here in hopes of a better life.
See how many migrants we get, hopefully more than 1 or 2. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, doing good. Perfect. That's excellent. Now, let's do something else. In Therapist, we'll sort by migration wave, pull our dwarves in. And now that they've all arrived, they will all be set to haulers. Which means I can turn off hauling on my specialists. Because right now, I don't want them doing hauling, I want them doing whatever it is I have them doing. We don't have anybody, it looks like, with too much in the way of special skills. Our one guy here, he's a good doctor, so we'll make him into a doctor. Ah, there he is. We're going to put the wrong category. And what we'll do is we'll make him into our mechanic for right now. Have him crank out mechanisms. we can let him take care of those jobs too while we're at it, because once the mechanisms are up and I've got 10, I'll have enough for the start. Alright, let's see what else we gotta do here. And this is where I wanted to set something new. So, first I'll set them to no profession, which is just my clear labor's profession. And these guys are going to become the core of our new fledgling military, I suspect, because I don't really have anybody with any real military skill right now. None of these guys have much. I don't think therapist lists the new discipline skill yet. It's in social. Doesn't look like they do. Says I. Therapist's gonna need to fix that one. Nah, architect is something I only do somebody specialized in once my fortress is well established, because it is primarily a labor solely about creating value, and it has no function of its own, basically. So I'll throw architecture on lots of people, often my haulers, just to make sure that anything involving architecture gets done. And then later on, when we want to build things that are worth more, like wells, for example, then I'll go back and I'll take the time to actually skill up a architect on building, supports and tearing them back down again. And then once he's got a decent amount of skill, then I'll have him build the well if I care about the value. But early on, our primary concern is not in wealth. Wealth is actually harmful to us very early, because we want to take our time and get a fortress built before we start attracting attention, basically. And if we start cranking out the wealth early, we have to crank out the defenses right along with it. So typically I embark with this many miners so that I can get some underground space dug, and then I can roll into something else. Now, none of these temporary miner or masons are going to build their masonry skill high enough that I run the risk of having them get a strange mood in it. They'll get their mood in mining because it's what their highest is. So as long as I don't let them build 8 levels of stoneworking, for example, they'll still mood mining. Now, as my fortress gets another migrant wave, if we haven't already moved people into additional professions, we'll probably move some of these folks into miners so that I can have a chunk of them. Yeah, I actually uploaded the other videos last night, basically, when I got home. If you checked out the ad, then at the bottom is also a link to the information of the custom professions I'm using. I may show folks how to make one, because we're gonna make a profession for these here in a second, because I'm gonna have one specially for the military dwarves. So now it's time to talk about military. I know we haven't really done much with this yet, but the first thing we're gonna do is create a squad. And I don't care what uniform these guys have, because I'm not actually going to use this as a squad. My militia commander is basically never going to see the inside of a battlefield in his entire life. So my farmer worker here, who has nothing better to do other than become my newest squad leader, is now my militia commander, and I'll actually create a new squad specifically for the axe dwarves to be. And I've just gone ahead and loaded them in. So in the military screen, we assigned a random dwarf as our commander, and then created a new squad that reports to him. Basically, yeah, if you get... I don't know if it affects tables. I'd have to double check, to be perfectly honest. I don't usually pay that close of attention to it, because you'll place lots of tables and your value will go up just based on their quantity, if nothing else. But yeah, there's a large number of objects that can basically be quote tastefully arranged, and your dwarves will get happiness based not only on seeing the item, how it was arranged, its quality innately, but also additional bonus if it's their item, so if it's built in their bedroom. So when we actually build bedrooms for our dwarves, we're going to put a bed, a chest, and a cabinet in each one. So our dwarves are going to have the requisite 3 pieces of furniture that all dwarves need, and they'll have a door on the front of their room that's theirs as well. So they'll get to see all of those items as they walk in and out of their bedrooms all the time. The dining room is going to be an enormous value just by virtue of how many tables and chairs are in it. If our mason that's making them is any good at all, substantial portions of them are going to be masterwork. But yeah, take your well, for example. A lot of the items don't have a quality, so the blocks don't have a quality. There's no masterwork blocks. So the blocks have a set value when they add in. But some of the other items, like the bucket, for example, can be made well. And if they are made well, they not only have a higher value innately, but when the whole collection is put together in the well by an architect, he then gets another skill check, basically, to build an additional quantity of value on top of that. Okay, so we've got these guys assigned. Now we'll come back to this in a minute. I just wanted to go ahead and get them in the military so I didn't forget. We'll come over here and we'll decide what we want to have these guys doing. Now, generally speaking, I want my military hauling. If they're not doing anything else, if they're not training, I want them hauling. Now, this guy technically is a farmer, so let's put him into the farmer profession, and then we'll go get another male. And unless you think I'm being sexist, the reason I'm getting males is because I am allowing pregnancies, which means that your female dwarves will actually give birth right in the middle of battle. Okay, so now we've got them assigned to hauling, and that's pretty much it. I don't really want these guys doing other labors. They're going to spend their time full-time in the military. So now we'll do a new custom profession from this dwarf. You'll notice that it tells us at the bottom there are 9 skills selected because we've turned on all of them for these guys. We'll hit OK, and we'll call this military. And then we'll apply it. So now we've got 2 farmers working, we've got 2 military who will start training here momentarily, and everybody else is either hauling stuff full-time or is a specialist worker of some sort. Now we see who's idle. Okay, so we've got 1 hauler who doesn't have anything to do, and one of our farmers has nothing to do. Now, because we've got the additional population, we've basically more than doubled our initial population. Our drinks are going to diminish incredibly rapidly at this point. So my hauler profession has brewing. Basically, I don't care who brews the drinks as long as somebody brews the drinks. When they have nothing else to do, i.e. when they've caught up a little bit, somebody's going to come, and these buildings here are mostly jobs that are being done by haulers, and they'll come and start setting them up. Included in that are 2 stills, which just went up, and we will brew. Oh, we don't have a food storage item, that's our problem. So we need barrels. What's our carpenter doing? Ah, I gotcha. In the stockpile menu, there is a small feature called reserved barrels. I strongly recommend setting that to something other than 0 if you're going to actually use barrels. It doesn't apply to rock pots, but the barrels, you're probably not cranking out 5 or 6 at once. You're actually cranking them out one at a time, probably mixed in with other furniture and other items that your carpenter is producing. And what you'll run into is that the stockpiles will claim the barrels in order to store loose items, and there won't be any left over for your brewer to use. And what the reserved settings do is tell your dwarves that you want to make sure there's at least this many available for jobs, not just going into a stockpile. So at this point, my carpenter will keep cranking out barrels, and until there are at least 6 of them, the 5 barrels that are available will all be reserved for brewing or other processing jobs that need a barrel. And now we'll go ahead and promote a few of those jobs. Now, putting it ahead of the job he's actually doing doesn't make him stop and switch. It means he finishes the job he's on and he still goes to the top of the list. So this next thing he makes will be a barrel, and then we'll move barrel back up the list again. And it looks like at least one of our miners at any given moment is going to need something to do because we don't have enough actual masonry work to keep him busy just as a temporary mason. So we'll build these next few tables here and get a little more value into our dining room. Remember, in the case of rooms, that's pretty much the only time I care about value, and I want the rooms to be nice because that influences the happiness of my dwarves. Eating in a nicer dining room is a happier thought. And as it happens, my draft animals this time around are 2 horses, both male, both butchered. I don't keep llamas, and in this fortress I'm not keeping pigs. So that's pretty much everything. Boy, I miss DF Hack Auto Butcher. Now what'll happen is people will move the items from the butcher's workshop where the butchering is to the inner ring here, which is meat and animal byproducts, and then they'll move that stuff from there into the main food stockpile. And this little food dance is underway. So now we're producing meat and getting it cleaned up. Workshops are not included in that as far as I know. I don't know of any exceptions. So the only thing that would pretty it up is if the item involved in making it was of better quality or better value. So making your workshops out of gold, for example, makes them more valuable, but the value doesn't have any impact on anything. It's just basically accumulating wealth for wealth's sake. Now, if the construction actually took an item with a quality, then you're probably going to end up with an architect. So already our drinks have doubled from when we started. We haven't even made a dent in the stuff we've gotten from our farms. Butchering the horses has yielded us 100 meat, so we've more than tripled our food stocks just in meat and fish alone. That's not counting the plants that will promptly brew down to nothing. And then we'll have enough food to last us 3 migration waves at that point. Idler count needs to stay low, though, because we really do not have the labor to spare. So, choppers are going to have something to do here in a brief moment. And I'll show you how I set up the military, and we'll get our squad assigned schedules. That armor stand will basically form the core of our barracks, and away we go. Oh, and I am going to need one more thing. I need 9 hatches. See, a few versions ago, I learned a nasty lesson about putting my barracks at the top of stairs. Because occasionally, while training, dwarves will throw one another, as you might with a wrestling move. And what'll happen is that they'll throw a dwarf, and he'll land on the staircase, and he'll fall all the way to the bottom, 30 floors down, and explode. So we'll put ourselves some hatches over the top of our barracks staircase, basically. Now, we can use the stock screen, even though we don't have a record keeper, to kind of get an idea how we're doing on blocks. So 400 is going to be somewhere between 400 and 500, I believe, in this case. So that's 450 blocks. That should be enough to go ahead and get us started on surface construction. So I like my design to be nice and centered here, so bear with me. I'm going to do a little bit of measurement here. And our Mad Doc needs something to do, so he just got drafted into the temporary Masonry Corps as well. No traders or migrants at all. There is a way to do wall building with Quick Fort. You designate build orders instead of dig orders. But yes. To be honest, I can't answer that. We haven't had migrants, or we just got our first wave of migrants, so as far as I know, it's not something specific to the version. It would be something specific to either that you've changed or to an older version that you're tinkering with. It's possible your world gen has them all died out. I don't know what happens if the only living dwarven civilizations are dead in your world. I want to temporarily get my carpenter to finish that floor right there so that somebody gets the so that we don't cut ourselves off if that tree grows. Well, we just got our first migrant wave, so we'll see. If migrant waves are broken, then we'll figure it out pretty quick when we stop getting migrants and don't get any visitors. It's possible. I noticed something on the embark screen. We had to be fairly close to a goblin civilization before we actually saw goblins listed as a neighbor. And so I'm wondering if Toady changed something in terms of how far a given civilization basically can roam from its home bases. Yeah, it's possible. Well, no, the starter pack wouldn't affect it if it's a Dwarf Fortress bug. It would only be if there's something in the starter pack that we changed, like the child cap or the... And that would be actually changing the Dwarf Fortress init files to cause different behavior. The starter pack itself shouldn't be causing any bugs, per se, in Dwarf Fortress unless it's got a setting flipped somehow. And I'm not aware of any setting that would affect migrants and traders. I mean, you can turn invaders off if you want to play without goblins, for example. Don't want to run the risk of going to war. Birds, probably. I'm assuming that's a bug. I understand that animals are now skittish. That's cool, I get it. But I'm not real sure that everything should be spooking as much as it is. I added discipline to my dwarves because apparently if you don't, they do the same thing. I'm not sure what that's supposed to represent. A bunch of scaredy cat dwarves who Never been outdoors at all. Weird. Oh, well, that's no good. A bug that stops all your immigration waves is terrible. Building a fortress of any size is going to require labor. You will need as much as you can get. So our haulers right now are not doing anything. Our military is not doing anything of importance. and they just got drafted into the Masonry Brigade. And so now we'll start throwing walls up. We'll have, 10 dwarves standing side by side building a wall. And just like in games of yore, like Dungeon Keeper, the more work we can do in parallel, the faster it will get done in this case. You will notice that dwarves tend to favor new construction over old. So the stuff I designated last, it gets built first. See, now you got me curious. I haven't looked at what the contents are. Strict population cap. Well, let's take a look. Strict population cap, 220. So we won't have that one. I didn't copy anything over from 4004 to 4005 in terms of settings, just save games. I had to go through and make the settings changes manually, and hopefully I didn't miss any. Well, a real castle would have done something to avoid interior corners. Technically, you could build, the best would actually be something more like just a square keep, because there's no reason to have the external facings, if you will. But I wanted something a little more exotic than just a square, so we're doing something a little more aesthetically pleasing. But looking at it, we're going to end up with round towers that are a little smaller than our square ones. So if I was going to do rounds, I'd have to go a little broader than what I did. So we'll have to figure something out for that. But for now, we'll leave it, and I'll just see if maybe it looks better once I've got a whole bunch of them done. We'll keep the one pond inside. That'll get us some short-term fishing. Well, I'm guessing you probably won't need a new world. D init is general behavior, and you can change it on the fly in your game as long as you restart Dwarf Fortress. So theoretically, if strict population cap being omitted causes no migrants to arrive, adding it properly and then restarting Dwarf Fortress, if it's running, would fix the problem. At least in theory, assuming Toadie's not doing something crazy like writing that out to the file, which wouldn't make any sense. Huh, we're screwed. Well, we're boned. So, there we go. Siege in early autumn. And I did squat for wealth. Oh, fantastic. Well, boys and girls, it's been a nice tutorial, and I hope you've all enjoyed watching. Siege in the first autumn might be a little quick. I haven't looked. The net result is going to be we restart because there's no freaking way I'm going to be able to repel a siege with no military, no traps. So, yeah. Ignoring the hostiles in the caverns, we're looking at a squad already. And we haven't even had our first caravan. That's crazy fast. Now, I can understand that if I was cranking out wealth, but this is nowhere near the kind of wealth production that would have gotten us a siege this quickly. And this is all assuming that and basically we're just going to draft everybody into the military because we're going to need every axe we can spare. Well, I was working on the lockdown option. We just ain't there yet. Usually I've got well into the second year before we would get attacked, let alone a siege. And I'm really going to go with something changed, so we've tuned up the number of invasions and early, quote, early fun we get, apparently. Oh, wait, we made warhammers, didn't we? That was silly. They've got at least one crossbowman with them. And they just took off because they saw a kitten. And I do believe they have routed. Okay, then. So, yeah, that was the siege. Fantastic. Let's continue with the walls, shall we? Apparently the goblins have no discipline skill, would be my guess. My guess is for 4006 we start to see goblins that actually stick around and fight. Keep in mind, my dwarves are basically unarmed, unarmored civilians with war hammers. So this would have been an absolute massacre. And this is insanely fast by the standards of 3411. So let's review. We'll cancel our order, and everybody who isn't doing mining is going to be doing masonry. Everything. Right. In fact, let's do this right. If you ain't making blocks, you're laying blocks. Yeah, I'm guessing that's probably what the problem is. I've read a lot before I started, and the thing people were saying is make sure you include discipline, because if you don't, your dwarves will chicken out and run from everything. And I'm betting that natural discipline does not occur in goblins any more than it does in dwarves. So you end up with a situation where the goblins don't have a discipline skill. They see a kitten, one squad gets spooked, it runs away, and by the time it stops running, half of its guys are off the map, so the squad routes. And then because the squad is routed, now you've broken up half the siege, and it's also possible they scale with time. That's entirely possible. But what it basically means is that in future tutorials, when we actually do this, quote, for real, we're definitely going to invest in early defense, basically. We'll throw up a wooden palisade internally. Because I've done enormous wooden forts really early with the new trees. It's trivial. Yeah, if I was going to embark in an evil terrain, I would definitely be doing this differently than I am now. This is a relatively benign environment. Otherwise, I wouldn't have even taken this long to get walls up. They would have been like the first thing, and we probably would have brought raw materials to help get the walls up faster. It looks like in 4004 we'll either throw up a wooden palisade immediately, or we'll start doing one ramp down and then bringing our fortress in from the side, basically. And we'll build a tiny little gatehouse. So that's probably the shift from 34 to version 40. Maybe it was a turkey they started shooting at before the cat scared them all.
There's no place for the merchants to unload their goods. Build someplace for the caravan.
Yeah, embarking on evil terrain really is like embarking in evil terrain. It means business. I don't know how else to put it. The bad things are coming to get you, and they are not going to play nice. Now, I think the depot requires architecture, so we want to make sure that everybody has that. So we'll get that job done. And someone will come along and build the depot, which will get the merchants inside. If you've got evil dust, and it happens in the first spring, you probably don't have an embark. There is. If I were embarking in evil terrain, I would either bring enough materials to literally throw nothing but a roof up over my head and the wagon's head. I wouldn't be bringing animals, because if you kill them, you have to get rid of them immediately or they resurrect. Probably would help if I got them out of military mode, wouldn't it? this is new. Alright, so generally speaking, what I'm going to request for the second year are yarns and silks in terms of thread. And let's see, we'll go get some silk cloth. Just the regular cave spider silk, the special cave, the giant cave spider silk is more expensive. Leather, we'll take all the leather we can get. It's used for quivers, I can use it for cloaks, I can use it for clothing, bags, all kinds of things you can do with leather. It's relatively cheap, comes in bins, so if I use it up I have free bins. And we'll take every metal bar we can get our hands on. Not sure, Amin. Well, you just saw we got news about all the settlements of our civilization that basically got overrun less than a week ago, or less than a few months ago. Apparently right now the military stuff isn't fully implemented, so whoever does the actual attack automatically wins, even if that wouldn't necessarily be what happens. It sounds to me like Toadie's got a little bit of work to go before that feature will truly be ready to go. So here come our merchants. The difference between silk, cloth, and yarn is primarily of kind. That's not to say that there aren't value differences, there are. But primarily the only reason you're going to be concerned about it is that silk is a little harder to come by without trading. Cloth can be made from pigtails, which you'll have in relative abundance if you bother to plant them. Yarn can be had in relative abundance by bringing sheep and letting them breed. The multi-layered trees have several effects on us. First off, I've probably cut all of 30 trees, maybe, let's say. Probably not much more than 50 or 60, and I've got wood out in the yang. There's no way I'll be able to use this wood up before we have to worry about getting it indoors before the next siege shows up. As soon as these last few trees are cut, I'm actually going to do something about making sure that the trees don't grow directly above our fortress, so that we don't get a situation where logs are falling off the trees and punching holes in the roof. And then once I've got the trees pushed back enough, then we'll build some, we'll allow some to grow inside the walls for harvesting. On the outside of all these fortifications, I'm going to go around and dig a 3-wide trench out to its widest point, so we'll actually touch that pond and drain it. We'll touch this pond up here and drain it, and I think we'll end up getting this other pond as well. So all the ponds immediately right outside our walls will be drained out. And then we'll have a gatehouse here with our trap / caravan temporary entrance here. Well, a lot of it is just understanding how the changes will impact you. Until I know about the changes, I don't know how they're going to impact me. It's only because I've read the stuff that people have done, in the first 5 versions since this first came out, and spent some time thinking about how it's going to impact my fortresses or my designs. And already I wasn't aware of the early siege problem until just now, basically. So now we've got a situation where, what I originally had planned for this is obviously too extravagant a design. I want to make sure I get a smaller fortress up faster. So we'll switch from the large surface fort designs I've been doing in the past to something more like a small gatehouse, and we'll just do everything underground. No more exotic, human castles, if you will. Towers would come much, much later. And that's not quite right, because I didn't build that wall out far enough because of the tree. Think about this for a minute. Yeah, we're going to clear around it. Believe me, I'm going to be having a setback from my walls. So we'll have a trench around the inner part, and we'll actually use stockpiles temporarily to hold down the saplings until we can replace them with roads. I'll think about how I'm doing this for a minute, though. Well, forgetting what it is makes it very difficult for me to answer the question you've forgotten. If the question was, do you now regret planning a large surface fort now that they've cranked up the speed at which you'll start to see invaders? Yes. Yes, I do. Thank you for asking. Yeah, I've seen the random collapses in earlier versions, definitely. You'll get the standard cave-in message, and somewhere it'll jerk your view to will be like, out here in the middle of the trees, basically. Looks like trees are being treated as natural materials, and so it treats branch cave-ins like stone cave-ins. Caged hostiles get stuck in an animal stockpile until I'm ready to deal with them. Once I'm ready, typically what I'll do is I'll strip them of all their weapons, I'll leave them their armor, and I'll assign my military wooden training weapons, and I'll basically have them beaten to death. If I'm in a hurry, I'll skip the wooden weapons. So we can do spiked wooden balls. That'll be good. So that'll be a nice start to our design here. So we'll go ahead and convert you. You need to go back to being a worker. Right. And we'll get those last few block walls up, and the outer curtain wall will be done. We've been streaming now for just a hair under 2 hours. And we'll probably go for another hour and a half or so. And our guys are starting to finish up now with the stone construction. Let's see if they've got the armor stand is ready. So we have to put that right here. No, we'll put that right. 2, 3, and I can't make them deviate at all. So traps in the upper corner here. And the little corners get plenty. That's perfect. And then once we've got that in, we'll actually start working on getting the other things we need to have done. Namely, I don't have an armor smith, but we're by God going to get some armor in a hurry, because if we're getting sieges already. That's interesting. Shining metal, faceted metal, booming metal. Wonder if that's special items that are only seen in certain conditions that we won't probably get to experience ourselves. And now we need to assign some random schmo to be our temporary armor smith, so that we get our armor actually built. Yea, verily, and that random schmo shall be you. And in order to trade, we have to appoint in our nobles menu a broker. So let's go ahead and do that. Somebody who doesn't have anything better to do.